All right, Spencer, it's so good to see you tonight.
It's good to
I'm
see
glad you survived the excitement of Labor Day.
you.
Did you
Yeah.
have a good weekend?
Yeah, I was just, busy.
That's good. I am not the kind of person that can stand taking vacations. I hate. They just vacations make me incredibly uncomfortable.
Yeah,
And so, but we had been wanting for the last 3 years to do something with all the kids and our blended family and everything. And we started making arrangements way back in March without realizing that this weekend was Labor Day weekend. And the arrangements we were making were for Bear Lake, which Bear Lake and Labor Day weekend just should suck.
yeah,
But because of that, we accidentally made all arrangements so that we were all doing things the exactly wrong time to hit the long lines and everything. Like we went to one beach the day before everybody else got there. We went to another beach as everybody else was leaving. It just and we went one way on the highway when everybody else was going the other way, and there were 2 hour delays. We just it turned out to be a really good experience. It was a lot of fun.
yeah. Every once in a while, it works out perfectly.
Yeah, we stood in line behind 2 other people to get raspberry milkshakes, in Bear Lake, and
Mhm.
then as they were making them, my one of my daughters and I just walked around trying to find those chum straps for your glasses.
Mhm.
And we walked across the street, went to a store, started walking back, and in that short amount of time, we looked back, and the line for the milkshakes was now over a block long.
Oh,
So it
wow,
just that's the kind of yeah, that's the kind of wild timing.
just
Just really
serendipity. Like,
yeah, exactly. It was very very cool. So it was a good experience. I bought a yurt tent that is big enough that we can put in our queen size blow up mattress, and everybody else stayed in the house because they were all weenies. But it,
gotta have the
it was
creature
a lot of fun.
comforts.
It's when you have a blended family, it's always get a little bit nerve wracking, but it is so cool when because all the kids really honestly like each other, and
It's great.
it's just fun to see them. Well, last week we talked about oh, and sometimes when I switch screens, when we do the screen share, I don't. I'll be talking about something that you're not seeing.
Mhm.
So please, if you need to remind me, feel free to do so.
Got it. Will
That
do.
I've got to switch the screen that we're sharing.
Mhm.
I'm a lot better now, but it used to be all the freaking time. So,
Got it.
but so last week we were talking about Florence. This main part of Italy. And if we look at this map right here, this part of Italy, that's where everybody for the Crusades was going before they sailed on their boats to go to Turkey, which is right over here, or to North Africa, or to Israel, Jerusalem, the Holy Lands, all that kind of stuff. And so a lot of people are going through Italy, and that's why the Renaissance began right there. People are sick and tired of starting wars or being part of wars or being at the receiving end of other people starting wars. And I think that that's when they finally realized there's a lot more wealth that can go around when people are not concentrated on hurting each other. And people are coming back from Africa and the Middle East and Turkey and all these fantastic places with all these stories. Because you remember, for the previous 1,000 years before the Crusades, people in Europe lived and died sometime within 6 miles of where they were born. I think that the average for a lot of these countries was about 12 miles from where they were born. Can you imagine that today?
No, that's just crazy to me. I feel like we're so much more traveled, and then you have access via the internet to just anywhere, really.
Well, I remember, there's if you go up and down the I-15, about every 20 miles or so, and it fluctuates a bit, but it's about every 20 miles you'll see either there's going to be a little town, or there's going to be a suburb of a town, or there's going to be a settlement or a ghost town. And that's like about every 20 miles. And sometimes it's a little bit longer, but I didn't think that was like there's more than that between Cedar City and St. George. But you have Hurricane, and you also have there's a ghost town on the main route that used to be there. I can't Galveston or something. I can't remember what the name of it was, but and then there's also encampments. You have Cedar Fort, or and all those little things. You have Meadow, and then Fillmore. And I was wondering why is that? Why are they so close together? And as a historian at BYU said that when those towns were founded, uh, a family with a team could usually travel on a good day 15 to 20 miles with their team. And then it made sense because settlements started arising where people naturally park their wagon after days of travel. And today, I about twice a month, I drive up to Utah County and back again. And it's not that big of a deal. Yeah, it's a 2.5 hour, 3.5 hour drive, but so what? And you and me, our ancestors 100 years ago, that would take like a couple weeks. That just blows me away. Well, what is interesting about we're talking about there's two main renaissances. One is the Italian that we talked about last week. The other one is Northern Europe. And you can see here's Italy right here. What is the thing that is separating this part of Italy from everywhere else? It is the Alps right through here. These huge mountains that are over a mile high in some areas. But it was easier for people, a lot easier, to get on a boat and ride the waves all the way through here than it was to go over the mountains. Isn't that astounding?
Yeah, I mean,
This was, what's that?
yeah, I mean, I growing up near the mountains, it's not fun to be in them all the time. So it kind of makes sense, you know?
Yeah, and without really nice roads, it is hard to get through them. Even with nice roads, like you go on the Mount Nebo Loop, and that's kind of a struggle sometimes.
Hmm.
But this is the big thing. This is the big separation between the Italian Renaissance and the Northern Renaissance. It is because the Alps are right here. And it was so much easier for people just to stay home than it was to travel. And it's also interesting that you have Italy with the Catholic Church being so strong there. But at this time, this part of Europe, this is where reformist ideas start creeping up. This is where the reform starts in Germany, right here. Notice that Germany is on the north side of the Alps. I think that Martin Luther would have had a much different experience if the mountains weren't here,
Hmm.
you know? And that is amazing to me. And Northern Europe, you get all this stuff going on, all this cultural growth in Italy, kind of locked in like a giant petri dish with those mountains there. And what is fascinating to me, it starts to make a lot of sense that the Renaissance in the rest of Europe was significantly different than what we see in the Italian Renaissance. And a couple of these videos, I don't know if we're going to watch them because I don't think that the videos show up in the Zoom recording.
Yeah, I
But
saw that last week.
it didn't show up at all.
No, I think it was a really low quality video as well.
Okay, because I'm gonna try to show these. I'm just going to go through and try to find images that we can see. But yeah, it is pretty low quality.
Mhm.
Definitely watch these videos on your own. We'll talk a little bit about them, but definitely watch them. And I want to show you what is going on between Northern European and the Renaissance in Italy. And I think we'll look at a couple of these things, and I think that you'll start seeing pretty quickly that there is a difference. And arguably these images are not very good, but I think they're good enough to get these points. I'm sorry about the ad. I can't do anything about that.
No problem.
So I'm going to go back and look at a couple of these images again. And for whatever reason, I don't know why my internet is being a little bit slow today. So it's taking a while for the images to show up. But one of these is clearly labeled Northern Europe. The other one is clearly Italian Renaissance. And we're going to eventually we're going to see the imagery. Okay, here we go. Try to do this again. All right. This is Northern Europe. This is Italy. And in the actual video, this is a famous bust, or this is a famous sculpture done in a Roman style. And there's a lot of folded cloth. There's a lot of time spent on getting all this texture. The body is shown in a oh, we were joking about it. It's almost like, on the vanity channels for TikTok and YouTube and Instagram, people always try to show the candids where everybody's carefully poised, which is not a candid at all. And
Yeah.
but this looks like the guy is in a purposely languorous appearing um, setting. It looks like he's purposely trying to look relaxed, but that's not the case. There's no way anybody who's perfectly relaxed is going to have a neck doing this. Do you know what I mean? It is
Yeah.
Everything is very carefully done. The hair is just exactly right. If this is clear, you could see a lot of the very special detail around here. And then we look over here. Yeah, this guy's praying, but notice that the neck is a little bit more human,
Yeah.
and there's not an awful lot of detail in the cloth. There is detail right here. These are his sashes of office, and you have this careful book. But this person right on the right side, the face, even though it's kind of naturalistic, it's still very stylized. You probably wouldn't recognize this person that it's modeled after in a crowd. These guys, I think you probably could. If you saw this guy in the light of day, you could probably recognize him. So that's
Yeah.
one
It's more
difference.
natural.
What's that?
It's more natural in Northern Europe
Yeah,
rather than stylized perfectionism in Italy.
right. Yeah. And this is about at the same time period too. So like right here, this again, this woman, I'm sorry, the screen's gone blank, but um, we're gonna a little bit aggravating.
Yeah, YouTube is becoming slowly unusable.
Yeah, becoming very, very difficult to navigate. Okay, so on the right, what do you notice about her poise, her pose?
She's looking off away from the painter, and so is
Yeah,
the easel. Like there's
this
some
this is
other point of focus.
yeah. There's kind of this unfocused gaze.
Hmm.
Her face seems supernaturally posed, almost. The hand is kind of odd. What do you notice about this guy? What about his face? The colors in his face.
They're very real. Like I think I've seen that guy in an airport. You know,
Yeah,
just looks like a guy.
this looks like somebody is posing for eternity kind of thing, you know? This
Hmm.
looks like a dude wearing a towel on his head.
Yeah.
You know, the skin, it's not flattering. This is very flattering. She looks just really angelic almost. This guy looks normal.
Hmm.
And hopefully we see this. The subject matter is a little bit different too. You know, the guy that we just saw, he was looking right at you. It's a
Hmm.
dude you're going to see. The woman is looking off somewhere else, thinking about high and mighty stuff. If we look at in the subject matter itself, very script. There's a lot of scripture stuff going on.
Hmm.
You know, there's the Last Supper is very typical of the Italian Renaissance, having these little puntos angels. These are these um, the cherubim in Old Testament, or the cherubs in the Old Testament. They were the shock troop angels. They were the angels that God sent down to open up a can of whoop ass on people that were disobedient. This is what the cherubs became during the Italian Renaissance, confused with Eros, Aphrodite's son, who was perpetually portrayed as a little baby. And so, you know, a very different kind of angelic interpretation. When we look at here, even though this is a little bit out of focus on our screen, can you still kind of tell what the subject matter is right here?
Yeah, it looks like a sort of meat stand, if I had to
Yeah,
guess.
exactly. Is that right at pulled right out of the latest scripture? You know, for the
I
Old
would imagine.
Testament and New Testament. It is not directly related, obviously, to the scriptures like this. You even have a dude over here carrying somebody, or pointing down at something on the ground. What was really fascinating is in Italy, there was an embarrassment of riches for, you know, for the well-to-do families. There was a lot of money floating around. In
Mhm.
Northern Europe, people were more interested on practicalities as opposed to uh, lots of, you know, showing off how much money they had. Like in Italy, you'd show off your money, and in Northern Europe, you'd kind of, you know, just casually mention how many lands you had. You know, how many abbeys, yeah, your family supported, kind of thing. So it was a little bit more practical. And the scriptural references for the subject matter, even though the subject matters looked a lot more accessible, there were still scriptural references, but they would be a little bit more subtle, like with what kind of animals are in the meat stand. And there would be like oxes. You know, oxen are a very scriptural animal. They're the totem animal for the tribe of Ephraim in of the Israelites. So it's a be a direct reference to the Old Testament. But when used in Northern European paintings like this, it was just kind of a behind the hand, nod, nod, wink, wink kind of thing when there were scriptural references.
Mhm.
You know, and here, red marks the robe of, or, you know, is the color of sacrifice. It marks who Jesus is. Here, red is something that is part of the you know, that shows status, that it's part of decoration. It's a little bit less directly linked to scriptural story,
Mhm.
which I think is really interesting. And in figures, you know, Italy, this is David's, you know, Michelangelo's David, and it is considered the body ideal. You know, just every muscle is at full flexion, probably dehydrated for 3 days before take posing like this, which every self-respecting shepherd who walks around with nothing but a slingshot and a handful of stones, leaving all his clothes at home, you know, he's going to be totally ripped like this. You know,
Yeah, that
very
was just
very.
Italy.
What was that?
That was just Italy at the time, you know?
Yeah, yeah. That's just, everybody does this all the time.
Yeah.
And then here in Northern Europe, this woman is very obviously pregnant.
Mhm.
This guy doesn't have much of a chin. You know, when you look at this is a wedding of Arnolfini, and this guy who did this is so good. He even paints the reflections of himself in the mirror. But again, you're looking at, this is eternal consequence kind of perspective. And here, anybody who has a house this big would be familiar with this kind of a scene.
Mhm.
That, and there looks to me like he's in the process of moving his hand. She's in the process of turning. Maybe the window was open a little bit. Here, this guy forever and always is going to be standing like this. Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean? It's a very different way of portraying the energy of the figure.
Yeah, it
And
just looks
here,
like Europe was more focused on realism. Like,
I don't. Well, I think they're both focused on realism, but I think that Northern Europe is more focused on accessibility, accessible realism, where you as the viewer can actually connect with the person.
I see.
And I think, do you know what I mean? And in Italy, their realism, it was real for a moment, maybe not so much anymore. But regardless, like, all the proportions are right, everything like that. But I get the feeling that the person in the painting really isn't even aware that you were born. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think you're right. It is a realism that is much more tangible in Northern Europe by far. And she is wearing the red color to remind you that she has money.
Mhm.
That's, but she's also pious. She has the cross. She's kind of stationary, but it's the same kind of, she's a wealthy individual who has her own secrets. She's a woman about town, just like the Mona Lisa. But again, it's very different. Like, this landscape seems to be a fantasy landscape to me. And here, anybody's house you walk into, if they're wealthy enough to have red cloth in their clothing and own a book, this is what their house would look like. You know what I mean? Just like you say, much more real. And I'm hoping that the computer loads this quickly so we can see this. What on the right is the big chapel that Michelangelo painted. Oh, what's it called? I can't remember. On the left is a self portrait by Albrecht Dürer, but it's exactly like what you were talking about. You get this kind of posed indifference to the audience, and this guy is at rest, but he's a real dude.
Mhm.
So you're right, realism. And he talks about technique. Both of these guys, both artists are very interested in making something that celebrates something approaching the real human form. And with the technique, they're going in with smaller brushes, they're going in with finer details, they're going in, like you pointed out, with the guy with the red turban. And I think that's the name of the painting, Man with Red Turban. But the skin is going to be, this is where you'll start seeing um, uh, like rashes on the skin.
Mhm.
You'll start seeing malnutrition showing up, like rickets and things like that, because they are making people accessible. And here, everybody's going to have the absolute perfect linebacker human form. All the cloth is going to be just exactly the right space. Oh, this is the Sistine Chapel. That's where it is. In this case, the colors are really bright to draw energy, attention, and light to what you're looking at. Here, the colors are intentionally what closer representing what this guy would actually wear. Brown, you know.
I
I
also
think it's
kind of
just
see a modesty to in Northern Europe in both like expression of color and in expression of like clothing that they're wearing. Like there's a lot of nudity in the Italy. There's a lot of expressive color. There's a lot of just a lot there. And in Europe, it's just a little muted.
yeah, and it's interesting to me. I wonder why that is, and I think part of it might be maybe Italy had these kind of bright pigments were a lot easier to access
Mhm.
because blue and red are just and yellow are just ridiculously expensive at this time. You know, you would have contracts. I think I mentioned this last week, where you would have to use a certain percentage of lapis in your blue if you wanted to pay top tier, you know, and red is just ridiculous. But browns, you could access that kind of pigment a little bit easier. So maybe that had something to do with it. But yeah, you're coming up with some really good observations. And then emphasis. We already talked about this a little bit. In Italy, it's going to be the straight Bible stories, the straight stories that are legendary, you know, for in
Mhm.
the community, legendary history kind of thing. And in Northern Europe, yeah, you still have an insane amount of detail, but this is going to be a dude that people in the community met and knew. You know,
Mhm.
he's going to be somebody you recognize. Here, it's going to be the eternally youthful, idealized man, and that's so. I think that's really kind of interesting. We already talked about the emphasis: more approachable realism, more
Mhm.
accessible realism, more recognizable surroundings, more interaction with the viewer. And you know, when we look at Northern Europe Renaissance stuff and now Italian Renaissance stuff, do you think you could pretty well pick out, have a pretty good idea of what are the hallmarks for it being Northern or Italian?
Oh yeah, definitely. They're very, very different in like attitudes and expressions. Like just see so many, I don't know, they're very, very different.
And it's interesting because before looking at this, the differences, I thought they were the same thing, and they are definitely not the same thing, are they?
No, no, they are definitely not. There's like just I don't know. There's a realness to Northern Europe that's just not shared in Italy.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Now, I want you guys to watch this differences between the Italian and Northern Renaissance video. Um, definitely, I'm going to just show this really quick. This goes at this it goes into a lot of the same kind of detail, but he uses different. This person uses different examples, and another difference is going to be a lot of the Italian stuff is on the left instead of being on the right, as we saw in the other video. But definitely go through this. They go over very similar types of things. And what is interesting to me is this one also talks about the difference in medium. If Northern Europe is more concentrated on practicality, then it seems to make sense to me that the artwork there would be more focused on easily transportable work, stuff that you could source locally, like canvas for painting or paper for printing. Whereas in Italy, you know that's where you have the mountains. That's where you have access to marble a little bit easier. Not, I mean, both of them had access to marble for building, but the kind of white marble without any faults for or cracks for sculpting, it was lot less expensive to get a hold of that in Italy than it was in most places in Northern Europe. So you know those kinds of things. That's what this author focuses on, and you'll see a lot of the same kinds of differences that we just discussed as well. So definitely watch that video. Now
Will do.
this one, what's that?
Will do.
Now I'm trying to find another video and I hit the wrong button and I erased it, so I'm gonna come back to that and hopefully it will load. I do not know. I wonder if everybody in the neighborhood is on Facebook with their grandkids tonight or something. It's one thing I love about living in St. George. There are so many people that are significantly older than I am that nobody wastes any energy honking the horn at you if you do something dumb on the road. Everybody's been there, they've done that. They know grandpa and grandma drive like that, and it's just not worth getting upset about. So people are really chill. And I love that about St. George because occasionally I have been guilty of doing stupid stuff on the road.
I don't know if anyone can say they haven't been.
I hope not. I would feel so alone. Now I'm trying to find a better picture of this really quick. And hopefully pull this up and we can see it. What I like about this video is that they actually talk about it and they use the uh, tools of artistic critique as they talk about it. But this is the painting that we're looking at. All right, can you see this painting?
Yeah, that is crystal.
Okay, would you say that this is Italian Renaissance or Northern European?
I would say Northern European. Looks like a realistic depiction, but it would have to have been from memory, just because nobody is standing still in this.
Yeah, I think you're right. What are some of the other hallmarks that we talk about? Like, um, it is very definitely Northern European. Some of the things I see is this looks like a window into something that I might expect to see
Mhm.
in real life.
Yeah, exactly.
And the hunters, they aren't showed as um, idealized superheroes.
Mhm.
There's people over here warming themselves around a fire. There's nothing in there that speaks to me of trying to take a snapshot of eternity. you know,
Yeah.
that it, there's not an awful lot that feels like it's super idealized. And then if we come in really close to some of these things, what do you see about what's going on right here?
Within that
It
area,
looks
it
yeah,
looks
right here. These two women.
those two ladies, it looks like they are. Looks like one of them is pulling the other on a sled.
Yeah, they're just having fun. They are not concerned about reenacting a story from the Bible at this moment.
No,
You
definitely not.
know?
You got people going about their business kind of all over.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to let's see. Okay, we'll come to a different part. Now, these mountains right here are kind of idealized, but
Mhm.
they do feel like they would be idealized story uh, settings for Alps. They feel like they're real. They could be real mountains.
Mhm.
And you have different things going on. Like the whole looks like the whole village is out here. And if we know that these two ladies are playing, pretty good chance that these people are playing too.
Mhm.
The hunters are coming back. They don't have anything to show for what they did. All their dogs look really hungry and kind of irritated.
Yeah.
This is Peter Bruegel the Elder, and it's called The Hunter's Return. But it is what is interesting is that it does tie directly into Scripture. It is a scriptural story, but it's an indirect one. What
Mhm.
this is talking about is in the book of Genesis, and I believe it's chapter 2. It talks about God specifically making seasons, making time, the passage of time. And in Ecclesiastes, it talks about to everything there is a season. And then who the mamas and papas turned that into a song, turn, turn, turn.
Mhm.
But so it is foundationally based in the Old Testament, but you'd have to pretty much know your scriptures to appreciate that, to understand that, because this is very much accessible realism talking about harshness, the potential harshness of winter, and how communities need to be together during the winter, and that's how you survive. As I think it's a, yeah, it's kind of bleak because of the time of year, but I think that there's a lot of beauty and warmth to this, in spite of it being a winter painting, because it is a reminder you survive because you work together.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
think it kind of goes back to this modest feeling among everything is just within this Northern Europe is that there wasn't much, but the stuff that they had, they like took care of. You know, they didn't mess around with trying to make something stylized. That like if you got a picture done of you, you're like, I want it to look like me.
right, yeah, and I think there is stylization going on, but it's stylization that works to strengthen the atmosphere
Mhm.
of the whole thing, and I love that because I feel like I'm sitting inside. I'm sitting in one of my camp chairs, wrapped in a blanket, just watching this go on. 20 feet in front of me.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like it would just be like a normal day for people back then.
Yeah, I think that is just amazing. So,
Mhm.
but that's another video. Check that out. It's Peter Bruegel the Elder and Hunters in the Snow. And I love this because all the smart history ones are really good because they talk about the same stuff that you were talking about just now. They discuss in this, so definitely take the time to watch this video. It's excellent, and they even pull in on some other things where it shows all throughout the painting. There's stuff where people are doing everyday things and they're struggling through it in the snow and they're helping each other, and that's yeah. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie I Am. It's a movie by Tom Shadyac. He's the guy who directed all of the uh, Ace Ventura movies, that kind of stuff.
That's
He
unfamiliar to me.
was once he did Ace Ventura, he was catapulted into the stratosphere of success as a movie maker.
Mhm.
One of the interesting things about that is he is one of these Hollywood weirdos who, after having success, after having multiple multi-million dollar homes, he thought, well, having enough is great, having more is wonderful, but having everything is ridiculous. And he scaled back and he now lives in essentially a trailer park community and drives his bicycle everywhere because he realized having everything does not make you ultimately super happy. Having enough for yourself, having enough to make you happy, and having more than enough to help the people around you, that's, he said, what ultimately makes you happy. Who makes most people happy. And he did a documentary called I Am, where he talks about this.
Mhm.
And one of the things that he did is interviewed people at the Heart Math Institute in Oregon, where they are. I don't know if you ever saw the TV show Fringe. It's J.J. Abrams. Really cool, 5 seasons. Very
Yeah.
neat stuff.
Mhm.
And they do stuff at the Heart Math Institute, which seems kind of fringe science, but it's not. Um, there's a guy named I can't remember his name. Heinrich. No, Wilhelm Reich is his name. He was a German scientist, came to the U.S. Before World War II, but he was a super genius working with things outside of ordinary radio transmissions and stuff. And he was the guy that first recognized that plants somehow are signaling each other when there was damage to them, and that's how animals get the signal to take off out of a forest when there's a forest fire, because the plants and the mycelial network are communicating. And HeartMath Institute explores this, and they realize that with your electromagnetic um, field around you as a human being, you can interact with other people without even realizing it. And that's sometimes why you come into a room. There's the ex boyfriend or girlfriend in there that you don't know, and suddenly you feel really tense, and you don't
Yeah.
realize it's because somebody is in there who doesn't like you. But a lot of that is because of this electromagnetism that your body puts off. And all that comes down to is, in this movie, one of the things he says was that biologists and ecologists are realizing that the idea of evolution through fitness. The most combative and the strongest survive. That's not actually how what the fossil record supports. What the fossil record supports and what people are viewing support, people that are exploring wildlife, is cooperation is what allows evolution to make dramatic leaps. So
Mhm.
animals living together in an ecology and societies that cooperate survive. I thought that is pretty fascinating, and I think the history does support that. You look at the Roman Empire that stayed around Italy collapsed after a couple generations after Constantine moved to Turkey. Constantine, he was in Ravenna, Eastern Italy a little bit, but concentrated his seat of power in Turkey, Constantinople. And while he was there, he didn't isolate himself. He made friends with all the communities around. Conquered who he had to, made friends with everybody he could. And at any moment, walking down Constantinople for 1,000 years, you could overhear a half a dozen to a dozen languages, people cooperating. His Roman Empire lasted 1,000 years longer than the Western Roman Empire that decided to insulate itself and kick out everybody who didn't belong. Isn't
Yeah,
that
and
interesting?
yeah, it is very telling, that humans are meant to work together as much as possible.
It's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
But so definitely look at that video. And I did want to share some examples of different artists, and I think you can really see what a different art. You can really see what those differences are. And here this is early Renaissance era in Northern Europe, and of course it is not. There's not an awful lot of realism going on, but I really love this design. The Unicorn at Captivity has that same kind of surrealism as we saw that first painting that we kind of dissected last week
Mhm.
with the very unnatural Mary, the very unnatural angry old man Jesus that was
Yeah,
inhabiting the body of
yeah,
a baby.
the
Yeah,
perfect
just
baby.
very unnerving. I want you guys to watch this video. It's a short video. It's a history of iconography. What is fascinating to me is as you look, I mentioned that there are cues or clues in a lot of this stuff that tie it into scripture, even if it doesn't look like it's directly scriptural. And the history of iconography, we go way back. Um, there are stories and people that are important to different cultures that are represented through symbolism before they are represented, quote unquote, realistically. And one of the reasons is you can't always have, if you decide what Mary looks like, that's going to shift with whoever is in power, whoever is controlling the narrative. If you want to tell everybody what Jesus looks like, that's going to shift with who's in control.
Mhm.
But if you derive a system of symbols, then people can put those symbols in the painting regardless of their skill level. And we'll see this when we look at Byzantine art. What's going to happen is it doesn't matter how good the artist is. It doesn't matter if they put it into everyday language, visual language, so you can see your neighbors in the paintings. You will know what the scripture story is by what the elements are that are in the painting. Like Mary is usually shown with a lily. And both Mary Magdalene and Mary, the Mother of God, are going to be shown a lot of the times with blue. And Mary, the Mother of God, sometimes is going to have green as well. And there's the flowers that are printed on the robes that we saw last week. These 5 petal flowers. They're not direct. They're kind of a stylized flower that stands in for a lily. They're kind of like the fleur de lis kind of idea. And so it's another mark that signifies who that person is. And what's fascinating is that most people knew enough iconography that the patron saints of their family, they could see in any painting, they could see the implements that are tied to the saint that is a patron saint to their family, or the patron saint of the guild, or whatever it is, the colors that are associated. And so that kind of stuff is really important, particularly in the Northern Renaissance, when people are showing you everyday scenes. If it links back to scripture, now you can tell what the scripture is, what the scriptural story is. So there, a lot of these videos I want you to look at are basically deconstructions of the different paintings and things. And I'm not going to be able to go through a lot of them because my internet is being weird. But one thing that I really like is actually, I'm going to try to find some of these as just pictures because the ones that I have are not showing up. So we're going to say, so let's see if we can find this. Oh, and waiting for it to load. Gee whiz.
One of those things.
Okay, I really like this website. It has a lot of images of the stuff that we are looking at. Now,
Mhm.
Michael was a sculptor in Germany who really knew his stuff.
Mhm.
And he is the guy that made this altarpiece. He was a woodworker, he was a sculptor, he was a painter, and everything you can imagine in between. He was probably children and loved kissing puppies. You know, this is an altarpiece he did for St. Wolfgang. I don't know a lot about St. Wolfgang other than he was a patron saint of the community who
Mhm.
commissioned this altarpiece. And so Michael is the guy who did the paintings. He's the guy who coordinated all the wood carving, all this kind of stuff. You know, he knew what he was doing. This is as much as it's going to load for right now.
Mhm.
But as we look at this kind of architecture did not exist in the time period that's being represented. This is, you know, this looks to me like it is Anna who is saying, "Oh yes, this baby is Jesus."
Mhm.
It looks to me like over here, this is Mary who is just having a quiet moment after her birth, and here's the angry little man Jesus, you know, as a baby. And these are in this is an architecture that was not prevalent at the time and space where these people actually existed. The clothes are not consistent with what they would have worn. But and this is very much Gothic style arching, which
Mhm.
didn't exist until 1,000 years after, you know, all these events happened. But why? But these scenes, they look very accessible. They look realistic because again, they're tying it into people's regular everyday lives. If
Mhm.
have you ever seen Talladega Nights?
That's the I can't. I think I'm thinking of a completely different thing.
It's the movie with
Heath
Will,
Ledger?
what's his face, but it's just a funny take on um, car racing.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've seen that one.
Yeah, and in it, they're having dinner around the table, and it's somebody's turn to pray, and they want to pray to the baby Jesus rather than the grown up Jesus, and they
Mhm.
start talking about, yeah, I don't like the idea of Jesus always being a baby. I kind of like the idea that Jesus is the guy that you wouldn't pick out of a crowd because he's just the dude there waiting for you to be nice. And when you're nice, you might recognize who he is, but he's like a homeless dude in the alley or something. And I kind of, that sticks out to me because it's really personalizing Christianity, and that's what, yeah, they make these incredibly beautiful things, and they are celebrating the importance of this eternal space. But the paintings are showing you reverence in perspectives that are a lot more accessible to you. They feel more realistic, and I love that kind of a thing.
Mhm. Yeah, showing that it's still applicable to
Yeah,
modern
yeah.
life.
That when you go to your neighbor's barn that was used in that painting, it causes you to remember, oh, Jesus was born in a place like this,
Mhm.
or could have been, and just a little bit of a reminder.
Yeah,
So definitely go through. What's that?
to cultivate that the Christ is still around. You know, the
Yeah,
feeling of him
that
is
idea
still,
that
yeah.
there is a validity to the religious lifestyle because there's always a reason to live by those printings or by those ideas.
Mhm.
And Albrecht Dürer is one of these artists that is just, he's still ridiculously amazing. He was a German, again, northern, at the tail end of the Renaissance for sure, because we're getting right into the next art period of the time, which is going to be Baroque. But what is amazing to me is just the facility that Albrecht Dürer had to do all those things that you were just been talking about, where accessibility, accessible realism, just all these kinds of things. And he did a lot of stuff. Now this is not showing up; it's not looking really good. So uh, I'm going to look up something and see if we can find it. Again, I'm apologizing for the internet.
No need, it's happens to the best of us.
Okay, I'm going to share this tab. This has a lot of the Albrecht Dürer uh, etchings. Now, what's something that you notice right away about these? Yeah, they're small. We can pull them up a little bit. Like his Madonna and Child.
These are a lot more stylized in comparison to the other examples of art from the period. You're seeing a lot more
There is
heavy poses and a lot less realism.
there is, and a lot of these there is. That's absolutely right. Like right here. Now there is an incredible amount of detail. Now this is the apocalypse.
Mhm.
And right here, this is when he does some of his stuff, it feels very posed, but still, this is a lot more naturalistic, I think, than most of the other Madonna and Child things. We're always seeing Mary, very eternal, holding a very eternal baby, and this is a baby that's really struggling to latch onto his mom because he's hungry, and he
Yeah,
looks like a fat baby. He doesn't look like the angry old man. So there,
yeah.
there are some significant differences, but you're right. It does feel very posed. Then here's a family grouping, and this is just a regular family, but Albert Durer was commissioned to do it. So of course, what is he turning the family grouping into? You have grandma holding her grandbaby, but what does this look like?
The one with that your cursor is on, it looks like
Yeah,
angels.
this one right here. I'm getting Madonna and Jesus vibes.
Yeah.
And I'm getting, here's probably the mom and the dad, or her son and his wife. This is where I'm getting angel vibes, like what you're talking about.
Mhm.
The concerned old man looking on, probably her husband, and then one of the other people from the estate. So this is just a family grouping, but he's using that religious iconography to kind of pose the grouping, so it's still a religious sermon kind of thing. And there's, when he hits his stride, let's see if I can find. Yeah, this is amazing. This is his stride. This is called Melancholia. And right here, yeah, like you said, we're really posed, but I still feel that this is solidly set in the Northern Europe because in Italy, are you ever going to see an angel looking like this, who's kind of sad with rumpled skirts, with her head down, writing something
May not be looking at the same thing that you are here.
on the top left?
I'm a little zoomed in, but I can see just the right hand side of it. But yes, I see what you're saying. where you have a sort of disappointment in an angel.
Yeah, here's the wing. Can you see that?
Yeah,
And the really rumpled skirts right
yeah,
here.
yeah, an imperfect angel.
Yeah, exactly. So we still have the posing you were talking about that is pretty consistent with his work, but this feels to me like it would surprise me less that this was Northern European than if I found out this was Italian.
Mhm. The difference
Now,
that I
what is
see is like
interesting? What's that?
the difference that I see here is the more like graphic detail to it. You know,
Yeah,
it's not
yeah,
it doesn't strike me as trying to look beautiful. It just there's a haunting thing to it. I don't know.
yeah, yeah. I like it, like an atmosphere to it. Yeah, very much. And I love that kind of aspect. And there's if you find on the internet a really high quality image of this, just start going through it piece by piece because you will see all these little teeny tiny details, like a safety pin laying on the floor, or a discarded pencil, or a couple extra hairs on the ground that look like
Mhm,
she pulled them out. Different stuff like that that you are not going to see in the ultra stylized Italian stuff, you know.
mhm.
But yeah, I think it's pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah, very interesting.
And I'm trying to get to the next one. Okay. There's a PDF that talks about this that really works. The Renaissance is generally a period between about 1350 and 1500. That's the kind of area that we're looking at. And
Mhm,
considering at this time a generation was about 25 years or so, that's
mhm.
about 6 generations of artists that are going to be doing stuff. And it is always interesting to me that, yeah, if you look at Northern European stuff and Italian stuff, you're going to have a pretty good idea of who's who.
Yeah.
And I'm really disappointed with what's going on with my internet, and so we're not going to be able to see a lot of the other stuff. But definitely watch those videos um, where it has you walk through for about 4 minutes some of the different artwork, and you will definitely see a very significant difference between the two perspectives, I
Mhm.
think. Now, I did want to talk a little bit about the weekly reflections. I am impressed. A lot of people are doing a really good job, but there's some confusion by some people, and I'm afraid that a lot of it is going to be I may have glossed over stuff. What the whole point of the weekly reflection is to apply the 4 tools of artistic critique to one of the things that we looked at during the module. And that will be from any of the videos, any of the artwork shown, any of that stuff. Excuse me. And if you find it and I complain and I say, "Oh, that wasn't in there," but you found it in there, I
Mhm.
really can't complain. But it's important that it is located within the module that we're looking at. So this week's module is Northern European Renaissance, 1350 to 1500. And if you can find something in there that is not in the module, do a little introduction and say, and just one sentence that says, this fits in the module because it's this and this, and I found it here, kind of thing. It directly relates. I have to say that because one of the weeks um, we're going to be talking a little bit about 19th century art in India.
Mhm.
But for another section I have, another class that I have, we talk about classical Indian art, which is 7th century to 11th century. And somebody was doing what they heard Indian art, so they were doing their reflection on contemporary Indian art. What are people doing right now in India? And that does not count. So you get a zero, but then you just need to go back, look at the module, pick something from the module, and resubmit, and you're fine. You get the points.
Mhm.
And sometimes I would give a zero to somebody because they missed using any of the 4 tools of artistic critique. And I want to show what this looks like. This is my example where, and I just totally made this up. It doesn't have anything to do with the section. But this week we viewed propaganda art from the space race in the 1960s. And so that's where I do the introduction. And for this, I chose the stamps. It ties in. I said why it tied in. Then for then these highlighted or these bolded headings are each of the four tools of artistic critique. Description. This is where we talk about the physical presence of this thing, what our senses encounter, and that's it. We're not giving history behind it. Right? I mentioned a little bit of the history now, and right here I mentioned a little bit of the history, but the predominance of the description, I'm talking specifically about what these things look like, how big they are, and then for analysis, this is where we start getting into extrapolating how is the thing made, and this you can do a little bit of research if you want. Find out if you're doing it on Durer's dry point etchings or his woodcuts. Maybe mention a little bit. Hey, I found out that they really preferred end grain and they use tiny chisels. So for this woodcut to have this much detail, the guy must have spent weeks on it. And you can talk a little bit about that. But this is where you describe how the thing was made potentially. And then for the interpretation, this you are interjecting more of your own perspective. What could it possibly mean? Why are artists in Northern Europe spending a lot more time on accessible realism than their Italian counterparts? What are their concerns in their life? How is that impact? How does that impact what they show in their paintings or their sculptures or whatever? How does it impact their materials use and the colors that they choose? Why that probably the color choice and material choice probably might go into analysis, but that could definitely impact their world or be a demonstration of their worldview. They don't, like I think you said earlier, they don't have time. They don't have energy for frivolity. Why bother with that? They're much more practical, and that could go for the interpretation. And then finally, you use your big girl words to, I raised all daughters. So you use your grown up big girl words to describe your evaluation of it. Does it work? Is it successful? Why is it successful? Do you feel that it's important? Why do you feel that it's important? Use your vocabulary and be precise. So that's the layout that we need, that we're looking for. And I think a couple people just forgot to include the image. You always need to have an image in there. Now, for the final checklist, you have the images. If you're going to have more than one, you need to include at least a sentence or possibly two of description for each of those so you can compare them later. You do your full analysis, your full critique using the tools of artistic critique. Now, this is confusing. I should find a different word because analysis is also the second step of artistic critique. So I'm going to change this to critique using the tools of artistic critique. But you use those four tools. Do you remember where those tools are found?
Yeah, I found them in the first module, right?
Yes, you're right. And I'm trying to get there so I can show that. So we go where to start, give a brief introduction, and then this is the four tools of artistic critique. This is what you go to, and this is how each one is described. You don't ask and answer questions. You can go to each of the questions listed under each of the four headings, come up with an answer to yourself for each of those questions, and start using that to inform how you write your critique.
Mhm.
And then
I'm on the wrong screen here. I'm still looking at the Albrecht art.
oh wow, that is really frustrating because I'm showing us I'm sharing my screen.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
should have
strange.
stopped the share. All right, can you see it now?
Yes, now I can.
Okay. That is really weird. I wonder why it did that. Okay. So this is where you find the 4 tools of artistic critique. And then, okay, tell me if you can you see the postage stamps?
The stamp, yes, now I can.
Okay, all right. This is the layout. You start with an introduction, like that is just 1 sentence long, telling, this was on the second page of the module, in the third video. I thought it was cool, and so that's what I'm doing it on. And then each of the 4 steps are highlighted. And then, so the steps are images, your critique, make sure it has a clear connection, which is it's drawn directly from the module. Or a couple of people have found stuff that was parallel to the module that we didn't discuss directly, but they were able to say, this is something else that Michelangelo did that I think also illustrates this. And that's great. That is just fine. But then you need to do the MLA style citations if outside sources are used. If they're not, you don't need to do this. If it is all your own personal opinion, you don't need to use this citation. If the image is something that you can screenshot from the module, you don't need to use an MLA citation. Now, in order, the MLA citations, let's see, I'm going to show you something. And let me tell me if you can see this. I'm sure it should say research and discovery projects. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. We go to research and discovery projects guidelines. Click on that. This will give you 10 different free sources where you plug in your HTML, the website address for the thing that you used, and it will create a citation in different style formats. And we are specifically using MLA.
Mhm.
At the end of each of your citations, if you have 1 citation or 3, at the end of each of them, you will need to include a phrase that says accessed on. And I'm typing that right now. Okay, I just typed it into Google bar. Can you see that?
I am not seeing that. Oh, now I am. Seems like there's just a bit
Okay,
of a
a delay.
Mhm.
Okay, so we're saying accessed on and then the date. Whatever format, if it's September 3rd, comma, 2025, that's fine. Use the same format on each citation. But the way you put this in after your last period of your citation. So if you include the URL as well, at the period, there's going to be a period at the end of that you apply. Then after that period, you put a space and accessed on the date that you accessed it. And then you put a period after that, just like that. That's the correct way to do that whenever you do include citations for online sources. The internet is constantly changing, but there is a permanent record just out in the the nethers somewhere of every page at every instance since the internet grew or started growing. And you can access those pages by things like archive.net or the Wayback Machine. What you do need, though, is the date. So in 10 years from now, if you wrote a really particularly excellent um, reflection for one of the modules and you want to show it off to whoever you're currently dating because you know they will be absolutely thrilled by what you wrote, and you're flabbergasted because the citations are no longer accurate, this is why you put the access on date. So you can recover your research citation sources by plugging that date in along with the website address into one of these archive or Wayback Machine type sites. And that is vital, especially as you guys move forward and have to do more important papers and research papers, for your last classes towards graduation. This is vital to have. So,
Got it.
Okay, I went back to the research and
Yeah.
discovery projects guidelines. Okay. So I had 10 of these. At the time that I checked these out just a couple months ago, they were all free. And most of them, you type in what style of format you want your citation to be. And you always need to double check this too, because sometimes they'll screw up. Sometimes they're all AI based, large language model AI based, and so there can be hallucinations occasionally. So you just got to double check it. And
Mhm.
if you're really in doubt, go to the online or the on campus um, writers lab, because those guys are really, really good. They are exceptional. And remember that when you do your citations, always have them in alphabetical order if you have more than one.
Got it.
Okay, so I think that was the big thing. That was the big thing I wanted to go over. And I also want to clarify for everybody watching this, do your best with the project and stuff like that. I know I have one coming up due. We are not going to worry too much about due dates for that project for this first one, because what I want to do is when we meet in, I want to make sure you guys get this well done. I want you to do it well. And so the first couple of projects, we're going to be a little bit fluid on the due dates for that. You're not going to get uh, late late scores for that if you turn it in late. I will put a 0 on if it's not turned in on time, but that can always be changed when you do submit it. Okay. So again, free pass on the due dates for the first two projects. That doesn't mean hold off on doing them until the end of the semester. That would be a poor idea.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all I needed to cover. So we're done a little bit early. But Spencer, do you have any questions about any of the stuff?
No, I think we covered it up pretty well. And yeah.
All right, great. I appreciate that, and I wanted to reiterate too. None of the scores you get on this in this class are permanent. None of them. At any point, if you get a score that you think is lower than what you want, you can go back, look at my notes, email me, and resubmit and get better points all the time. A couple people have done that with the weekly reflection. They did not do very good the first time around because they did not really understand it. We
Mhm.
emailed back and forth, talked a little bit, they got it, and when they turned it in, they knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, I
And
think I was in that boat
I
just a
love
little
seeing
bit.
that. What's that?
I think I was in that boat just a little bit.
Oh, okay. All right. So you got a perfect score now?
Not quite perfect, but I definitely will go back now. I didn't wasn't aware that I could go back again, but I absolutely
Yeah,
will.
yeah. You can go back as many times as it takes. And the most I've ever had is 5 times, but typically people are really good at 2 or 3. And by
Mhm.
after the third resubmission, the score is perfect or they get extra credit. It's just most of the time it's perfect. And I love doing that.
Mhm.
Um, I've had several students doing art projects that totally sucked the first time around. I tried to couch that using language that was very polite, but
Mhm.
we were able to talk it through. And next time that they addressed it, they did a beautiful job and nailed the assignment. And so anytime in my classes, uh, I try to make sure if you guys are going out of your way to take my class and especially doing this online, the least I can do is make sure that you can keep coming back and get the highest score possible. So, I have no problem doing that.
Well, that's great. I'll definitely take advantage of it.
All right, good. Excellent. And I found that most of the time, if people lose points, it's because they forget the silly things, like they forgot to put in the picture, or they forgot to put the access date on, or they didn't do it in MLA format. So, and that's usually you guys are all professionals. You guys are all uh, really good university level students. Making those kind of edits is a matter of a couple moments, and I've gotten turnarounds where I put my comments in, put the grade in, gone on to the next couple, and then 5 minutes later the person's already done the re-editing and resubmitting. So yeah, that's all. I love seeing that. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me this week and tonight, Spencer, particularly. I hope you have an absolutely wonderful week. And I look forward to next week's module, seeing what people do with their weekly reflections tonight. And the people that turn in their projects by Sunday night, even though I told you guys free pass on due dates for the first two projects, people that turn in their projects when they're due for this first project, even if it sucks and you get a low score, so you're going to go back and redo it, you turn that project in, I will give you extra credit. Okay, because what I would like is to see at least a couple projects that we can go over as a class so I can talk through all the best points and what makes the project successful. So anybody who watches this, extra credit if you turn in your project on Sunday, regardless of what that first score is. And again, you can always resubmit it after making corrections. All right. All right, Spencer, you have an excellent weekend and week, and I will look forward to seeing you on Tuesday.
You too. See you then.
All right, we'll see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.